The gate groaned like a dying beast, old iron complaining to the wind as the last of the timbers were rolled aside and the world beyond the wall released its long breath into John's face. He stood in the mouth of that gullet, boots crusted with ice, cloak tugged by a dozen sly gusts, and watched the flat pale sweep of the haunted forest unroll as if the land were a scroll awaiting his name. Ghost pressed close, red eyes lantern bright in the gray. Behind him the men of the watch muttered and shifted, their black cloaks flapping like crows startled off a gallows. "Go on, then," said Tormund from the far side, his beard crusted with rime until he looked to have come straight from the belly of a storm. He spread his arms as if to gather John in. "Either step forward or we'll haul you off with a rope like a calf what don't know where the grass is." John stepped. The wall's shadow, long and blue on the snow, swept past his knees. Then he was among the wild and thunderous quiet, where each spruce exhaled cold resin and distances went on longer than thinking. The clank of the gate behind was swallowed, a last iron heartbeat. For a moment John only breathed, and the air burned him like clean knives. "King," Tormund said, low and hoarse, and when John turned there were faces. 100, 2 more, bruised by wind and life, spears raised not in threat but in need. They looked at him as if he were a big fire seen across a night of starving, a fire that might not be there when they reached it unless they named it true. Ghost rumbled, a soft warning or a readiness, and brushed John's gloved hand with his muzzle. "I'm no king," John said, and the words went thin under the pale sky. They were true. They had always been true. "What you say and what the world needs can be two different beasts," Tormund answered. A smile lurked in his eyes. "And sometimes the world feeds the one that bites hardest." Ison, an old wood switch with a jaw like a hatchet and hair plated with raven bones, jolted forward through the press. She had a bundle of birch sticks tied with gut and a face that had learned contempt for men long ago. "You stand in the wrong place to deny crowns, Crow," she said. "This is not the South with its pretty chairs and iron hats. This is a country that makes kings when hungry." "Look at them," Tormund said. "They're tired of tribes and boasts. They want a voice to pull together. You held them once and broke the wall's commands doing it. Do it again, but for the right reason this time." "There is no right reason for a crown," John said. He had dreamed of crowns as a boy the way boys dream of dragons and long swords that leap to their hands like loyal hounds. He had seen what crowns do to men and what men do to keep crowns. "If I lead because we must live. No thrones, no kneeling." "Then say the words they'll follow and we'll use some other name," Tormund said, shrugging. "Call yourself First Among Fires, or the one we hear when we're too drunk to listen. Call yourself Snowwalker or Dogfather for all I care. We'll make a circle and you'll stand in its middle." Ison bent and struck the ground with her birch bundle. A crisp sound like bones cracking came back. "The old king's extinguished," she said. "The last was made a fool by whites and winter. We need a new kind. Not a king of taking, a king of keeping. A king of the living. The lad can do it. The dire wolf approves." Ghost blinked slowly, snow gathering in the hairs between his eyes. John laid his palm on the wolf's head, and the heat under the white fur sank into his glove like a vow of its own. He thought of Sam and Ed, of Sansa's sober letter folded in his breast, of Davos's clever hands, of Arya's laughter as fierce as a blade's hiss, of the silent face of a woman with hair like wildfire and eyes like storm. He thought of Ygritte and the sound she made when her arrow found him and his life became a hinge. "Give me a fire," he said. "Give me a path to walk. Give me the truth of what you want, what you are willing to give. I will not be a king over slaves. The free folk were never made for bending necks." "Good," Tormund said, and clapped him hard between the shoulders. "We'll build you a fire you can stand in." They moved that night, after meat and fermented mare's milk and a dozen promises that had the shape of threats in them. John did not sit on a chair but on a defleshed mammoth skull they dragged from beneath a drift, the bone stained honey by age. The circle was an honest one, no banners, no guild. Men and women came in a slow tide. Skin changers with their quiet eyes and difficult smiles, spearwives with arms corded from hauling sledges and wet skins, Thens wrapped mean and rich in bronze and furs, snowshoe men, raiders from the frozen shore with hair stiff with salt, a girl whose voice belonged to a hawk that roost on her shoulder and watched with a ball of yellow fire for an eye. They argued as if cutting meat from the same carcass with too many knives. A man named Guld with a face like flint wanted raids into the gift. South has fat on it, he rasped. South has timber not yet claimed by the dead. A woman named Sarag wanted to split east for Hardhome and take the headland. It burns there, she said, gesturing with her spear. Not fire, but a warmth in the stone. Enough to make potatoes grow even in a blind year. The then Magnar's nephew, who called himself Ragwin and had arms pounded by bronze bands too tight for comfort, only smiled. A king is something you test, he said. You don't hand a name like that to a man with words and a good wolf. I said I would lead, John replied. I did not say I would wear a crown or take your oaths. If you need to test me, do it. But when you draw blood, let it be for a reason. Ragwin nodded, pleased. Trial by frost, he announced. We stand until the cold chooses between us. No blade, no arrow. The last to move leads the fight. Arsti hunt. You choose to measure stubbornness, Tormund muttered, amused. A test for fools and southern princes. John let the test be. They went to a flat of snow between two spruces whose lower branches were shagged clean by deer. The sky was a sheet of tin. The wind had sharpened its teeth. They stripped to the waist, skin smoky with steam. John watched Ragwin's breath fog thick, felt his own blood retreat under the skin like a cautious animal. Someone flung a ladle of water across their chests and the world woke in knives. They stood, his scars remembered. He thought of the wall, of an arrow's bite, of a blade that was less a blade than a name and a grief. Frost ate up his calves and gnawed his thighs. Ragwin grinned, teeth blue. Move, the then breathed, or carry my horns after. John heard his own heart and the forest's deep breathing under it. He let the cold be a map. Here the bite is worse. Here it fails. He shifted not at all. He let himself imagine he was a tree, and winter was nothing but slow company. When the wind leaned into them like a lean dog and bit, John saw Ragwin's grin tick. The then's eyelids fluttered. The bronze bands on his arms cut his flesh. A line of red weld, bright as a berry. Tormund laughed softly. Someone began to hum, low and dangerous, a tune for stubborn oxen and men who thought they were mountains. Ghost lay down with his muzzle on his paws, eyes fixed on John's face as if to memorize the man who would not move. When the then's lips turned numb enough that his teeth chattered visibly, when his knees flickered, he spat once, an arc that shattered in the air and stepped back. His men roared delight and scorn. Ragwin lifted his hands. You stand, he said, so you lead the first hunt. Maybe you're more than a crow. I am many things, John said through a mouth stiff with cold. Most of them not pretty. They built the lattice of beacons the way a patient man builds a snare. One careful angle at a time, with little hope to spare but enough cunning to make a noose out of an ordinary day. John walked with Skinner Harb and Bone-Lace Lisa, two who knew stone, finding old cairns like knuckles poking up from a long-buried fist. They placed oil by each beacon and resin, sealed it against damp with bladders and wax taken from fort spiders that spun among the pines. The beacons were modest things, just baskets of iron upon poles scrounged from the bones of battered keeps and the ribs of long-dead ships. But their pattern mattered, seen from above by hawks and crows, and in the night by men who had run out of road. Each backward glance gave you the previous fire, and the next, a string of promises glowing like teeth. Ison interpreted dreams. A boy wandered into fire and came out with a map on his palms, burn scars shaped like a bend in the milk water, and she said that meant nothing except that someone had pushed him and he'd been clumsy. A woman dreamed of a white lake that sang, and Ison nodded. Hardhome's cliff is good stone, she said. There's warmth in the ground there, old heat, maybe not fire, maybe remembering. If we carve houses into the cliff, the wind won't eat the babies. Hardhome is a grave mouth, Tormund warned. We all remember the screams that came out of that place. We all remember the smoke and the lights going up like there was a dance on the cliffs, but nobody asked to join. That was then, Sarek said. She had frostburn at the tips of her ears and a face a war might choose for a flag. Graves must be plundered sometimes. The ground there knows how to keep a man's feet warm. You'd send us all to freeze elsewhere rather than risk ghosts? Ghosts already walk. I've seen them without skin. I've seen them in boys' eyes when the meat is gone. We will listen to the ground, Jon said, and to the old stories, and to what we can carry. We will not rush there and be swallowed. We will make camps at the cliff's foot first. We will learn the wind. He saw something then, not with the eyes that took snow and blue and the shift in Tormund's beard where ice cracked, but with the eye that dreams even while the mouth is busy and the hands are busy and life is a long chore. He saw habitable shadow, chambers carved into rock, smoke pulled by cunning vents, floors warmed by stone that remembered fire. He saw a woman with a newborn dozing against her breast without fear of waking to find the child turned to glass. He saw, and the sight was sweet but brittle. We will do it slow, he said. We will do it so that in 5 winters it is still done. Ravens went south by 1s and 2s. One carried to Castle Black a letter that read like practical sorrow. Let there be no raids into the gift, he wrote, as if the words themselves could suppress hunger. Let us trade. We have furs, bonework, obsidian. We need salt, grain, iron, pitch, copper. Let me send envoys under safe conduct to speak with you, Lord Commander Talit. He did not write Ed. He wrote the office because men carried names badly when they wore them, and the office must last longer than any of them. And to Winterfell he wrote, Sister, if I can still use the word with the ease it deserves, there is a world north of your walls that is not only storm and tales. If we can make some accord, we will make both worlds less likely to end. The free folk are not gentle, but they are human. He did not write the rest, the part of him that wished to walk south until his feet bled and the air softened, until the smell of the stable and the smoke from the kitchens became a coat he could hide in. He tied the letters and watched them go. Ghost turned his head to follow the ravens until they were black flecks and then the bare idea of wings. The first hunt Jon led as a leader of fires and beacons and stubbornness was not for men, though Ragwin lobbied for raiding a caravan from the new lords of the Umbers, which would have made a fine song and a poor arrangement. It was for a bear everyone had learned to speak of with silence. It had cleaned out 4 camps one winter night, taking meat, hides, and 2 men, a big, clever beast with fur like mottled midnight. It had eyes too quick to be mere bear, some said. A ghost of the old winter's making, said others. Jon shrugged at stories and went with 20, not more, because too many men in the snow make a noise like a boast, and boasting is food to a bear. He went with Lisa and Ragwin, Sarek, Tormund, Ison's lanky grandchild who shook all the time but could hear the whisper in a snowdrift and tell you if it was fox or death. They went east along the Milkwater where the sun dared a little more and the banks turned treacherous at sudden places, thrust up by ice moving underneath like the back of a creature waking. They found the bear by listening to what the forest would not talk about. There were birds chattering and scolding, and then there was a quiet so pure it made Jon's ears ache, like the silence after a bell's echo gives up. That was the bear. He saw scratch marks 8 feet off the ground on a pine. He saw where it had rolled in a patch of resin and slept, leaving hair caught like dirty snow in the bark. He strung obsidian on his belt and told Lisa to keep 2 javelins for him. But we don't throw until we must, he said. This thing isn't a monster, only a beast that thought men were meat because it learned it once. He did not say when it learned it. He had learned what the dead eat. They killed the bear at sunset and did it badly, which is to say they did it honestly. Sarek took a swipe that nearly broke her arm even through the fur of her coat, and Ragwin's first spear skittered off a rib and made the beast angrier, and the bear did not roar but grunted in a workmanlike way as it tried to open Jon like a fish and invest in his meat. Ghost leaped and seized a hinge of the thing's shoulder, and Jon went to one knee in the churned snow and drove his javelin up past the arc of the bear's reach. Obsidian punched like truth. The bear's mouth made a small O and a sound like a memory leaving a body. Fell. They stood panting and took stock, and Ison's grandson stopped shaking long enough to throw up quiet and neatly at his boots. They burned a sprig of spruce for the bear and ate meat that would keep 100 bellies for 5 nights. Under stars that seemed to have come lower to inspect them, Jon chewed and listened to Tormund tell a story about a giant he once wrestled into friendship. Ragwin sat with his bronze bands off and hands wrapping and unwrapping them greedily, as if remembering pain with love. Serrig cradled her hurt arm and smiled despite it. Ghost lay with his belly on the snow, ears pricked toward the deep dark as if listening to old masters. "King," Tormund said again. So softly the word seemed a thing you might cup between palms like a moth. "Not a king," Jon said, and let himself be warmed by a fire shaped like an argument's victory. It took time and it took failures. The first caravan south went with 15 sledges and came back with 8 that had not been robbed or splintered by ice. On the sledges that returned were sacks of rye and barley as big as a boy's chest, spools of copper, coarse woolen cloth the color of sheep, salt, salt, and salt. The 4 men who drove the missing sledges did not come back, and their wives sat by the fire and stared into it as if the blaze could be walked into like a door. Jon sent men to find them and, finding only splinters and a patch of snow glittering with spilled grain, he did not pretend that this was the same as success. But on the reassembled sledges, children thrust their hands into the salt and licked and laughed like dogs. The watch's letter came back with a thin smear of courtesy and a weight of caution. "Send 2 envoys under safe conduct," the Lord Commander wrote, all black stiff politeness. "Do not call yourself king. We will not guarantee safe passage to anyone who declares himself such." "I won't call myself anything the South calls things," Jon said, and Tormund nodded and choked on a laugh. They met at the middle of the world, under the wall's shadow where the ice leaned down like a sky falling. Ed Tollett had more lines around his eyes than any man Jon remembered, and his humor had been put so away that it was only a scent, like a perfume kept in a corked bottle. "If you take your people south of our line, my hand will be forced," he said. "I do not have the men to force it as it should be forced, but I'll do what my oaths demand. Keep them north. I'm not your enemy. We both serve living men and women," Jon said. "We both know how many of them are already dead. The gift has room for trade and little else. We'll not take your villages, but we must not die to protect southern sensibilities about where snow belongs." Ed grunted. "You're a complicated crow. I once liked that about you, but it broke my heart more often than it did me good." "You still have one," Jon said gently. "I keep it in the cold, where it lasts." Ed studied the men at Jon's back. Ragwin and Serrig and Tormund, Aelin the hawk girl with her hawk watching Ed like a glint-eyed god, Lisa with resin and pitch on her sleeves. "If you have a council, keep it loud. Quiet councils go wrong most often. If you have a road, keep it straight. Twisted roads breed excuses and ambushes. If I send ravens, answer." "I will," Jon said. He wanted to reach and take his old friend by the elbow and say a dozen stupid gentle things, but they were men who had stood in too many hard winds to pretend the world would go tender because they asked. At Hardhome, the cliffs listened. It was true that the stone held a slow warmth as if the earth there remembered fire or had buried a dragon in its dark. They tested by sleeping with bare soles on the rock and seeing whose toes stayed pink in the morning. They carved shallow sea, avies and then deeper chambers, the stone flint hard, and sometimes a vein of obsidian glittered through at an angle like a black promise. The wind shrieked above and lost its edges once it hit the carved faces and cunning vents. The smell in the caves was resin and tallow and men. It was not the smell of grave mouths. Serrig organized a band to fish the pale sea, learning to read the bruise color of the water where ice would gather and whether a patch of calm meant safety or a harvest of dead men. She came back with nets heavy with cold, dreams full of the sea's teeth and the night's belly. Ison's grandson learned to stop shaking with fear and shake only with the need to dance when he heard music, which surprised everyone more than if he had taken off into the sky on gull wings. Trouble came not like a shout but like a rumor. Men on snowshoe from the far west whispered of a new banner raised by the Ice River clans, a banner white as bone and painted with dark smears made of blood and soot, and the man who raised it named himself the Wind Driver. His name before that had been someone's brother, someone's cousin, someone's boy who learned to listen to the ghosts in the snow and liked what he heard. He needed enemies and he had them in plenty, Southerners and thens and men who lived in rock. He'd already cut down 2 beacon poles and burned them as if they were men. Ragwin eyed John, eager. "He wants testing," the Ven said, with a greedy light in his eyes like a lender's. "Let me take 20 and show him what bronze can do." "No," John said. "Bronze is for building and for the hunt that will feed us. This wind driver makes a game of breaking signals. We will make him tired of breaking until he looks for food. Then we'll leave nothing for him but choices that don't do him any good." He spoke in the low voice a man uses when teaching a wolf to heel. Ghost's ears twitched. They remade the beacons that had burned. They set false beacons and traps where cutting 1 pole would bring down a cascade of poles into a pit not the man who cut but his fellows fell into. They rigged spring lines with boulders that would swing like the fists of gods into the ribs of a man skulking. They left stores that were not stores. A sled loaded with sacks of snow that looked like salt, a cask filled with stones. They waited less like hunters and more like farmers who had learned that stones sprout bandits. It worked until it didn't. It made some hungry men choose easier prey. It caught a dozen. It killed 4 of their own with a boulder let fly at the wrong moment when Lisa's hand slipped in the snow. John made a fire and spoke the names of those 4 in the hearing of every ear he could reach, until the names were hot as the hearth. Sarek peeled off men. "We're not keepers of poles," she said. "We used to be hunters and raiders and singers. Every night now is caution, caution, caution." "You'll sing more if you live," John said. "Sometimes a day of caution buys a month of singing. I've watched men who loved war get quiet when it ate their sons." "You're turning into the South," she snapped. "King and rules and lists. Next you'll want to count the beads in a girl's hair to make sure she didn't steal them from a neighbor." She spat then, neatly, like a woman rejecting a wine too sweet for her mouth. "I'll take 20. We're going to the ice caves near Deadfoot Ridge. We always took fish there and came back with fingers frozen but spirits hot. Don't send a runner this time when we're late." "You'll take 12, John said simply. "Nobody takes 20 now. 20 is too many to feed and hide if Winddriver's men are near." When she opened her mouth to spit again, he took a step nearer and she stopped. "Go," he said, and the word was both blessing and demand. She left. 12 from Hardhome went with her, and 9 came back, not because the Winddriver or his men had found them, but because one man slipped at the wrong moment and dropped a rope, and they had to choose between saving 1 with the weight of 3 or saving 3 with the loss of 1. Sarek did not speak to John for 2 long weeks after she returned. She drank the mare's milk with a clean hand and a roaring silence, and if he passed, she looked at the cliff above his head. He let it be the tax the world asks for being alive among the angry. The Winddriver came in person at last, with a frost-white pelt around his shoulders and a crown made of ribs, which made Ragwin snort and Tormund grin and Ison mutter curses about ghosts wearing their houses. He rode a sled with a seat nailed to it, and the runners sang a high, pretty sound like a child's song when he came fast over hard snow. He stopped under one of John's poles and looked up. His face was soft and young and faithful to its hunger. "You're the crow who would be king," he called, without insult, as if greeting a priest who knew a better prayer. "I am the man," John said. He stood with Ghost on his right and Ragwin on his left and Tormund just behind, so that anyone thinking to count men would get confused and count wolves and laughter besides. "What do you want?" "I want what you want," the boy lord replied. "A people. Except my people should not have to make themselves small to fit in caves. The wind is our tent. I will drive it where I wish." He flung out an arm, his crown of ribs rocking. "Let's make an end. Send your best 10 against my best 10. We will meet on the flat beyond those birches. I'll give my oath on my mother's grave that I will not put a hand to the fight myself, nor will you. When the 10 are done, the living take the food of the dead and the losers go home." "You're young," John said. "Your plans are thin. I won't send 10 to die to make a point that feeds no bellies in a month. If you want to eat, come speak like a man, not a boy. Give up cutting poles. Bring me half the men you used to cut poles and I'll give you a valley to keep warm with work. You see, and drive all the wind you like there, and the wind will learn your name. Keep the other half and we'll build together, and when the dead walk again in some winter none of us can read yet, we'll have a place that stands. Or you can go on breaking and counting heads and find that head counts are only useful if you know why you need numbers in the first place." He heard himself and winced inwardly. He had picked up Ed's habit of making sentences long when he wished to keep men at a distance. The wind driver laughed, pleased. "You talk like the South," he said, surprised, as if John had sprouted a feather. Then he shrugged. "We'll see who the wind finds at our backs in the end." He wheeled his sled and went, and the quick song of the runners went with him. "Why not take his bargain and pit 10 against 10? Ragwin asked when the boy was gone. "Our 10 would feast on his. Because 10 men dead is 10 men dead," John said. "And because the story of a contest like that grows, and men will want to copy it every time they feel poor and angry. We need fewer stories like that and more of men learning how to set a hearthstone in a way that won't crack when the frost comes. We'll give them stories about how long a wall will stand when a seam is filled with pine pitch and ground bone." "You're a disturbing king," Tormund said cheerfully. "You talk about walls like you love them, which is strange. But you love the people who stand behind them, I suppose, and that's a kind of loving I can clap. At Hardhome they built the sun cairns, which were not magic and so felt like miracles. John had seen them in Old Town, of all places, low dark heaps of stone that kept root cellars cool, and he thought about them for warmth instead. He remembered Maester Eamon's thin voice and the way the old man's eyelids fluttered as if being alive were a delicate gale that might blow him away. He asked Lisa for stones and pitch and broken charcoal and bales of straw, and he asked Ison to lend him boys who liked to dig. They put the stone in rings within rings and filled the rings with dark, secret things, char and straw and woolen scraps, and built flues low and deep, and when the sun touched the stone remembered and held the warmth and passed it back down the flues to the rooms below. It was not much. It was enough that a loaf of barley bread baked slow and honest. It was enough that a woman stopped rubbing her child's feet and swore she could see the toes turn from blue toward something like hope. "They'll sing about that," Sarek said grudgingly one night, when she and John stood on the cliff path and watched smoke go up in tidy straight ribbons instead of mad torn rags. "If they have breath after the bread," John said, "let them sing with their mouths full." The letters came back from the south like migrating birds that had learned new routes. Sansa's ink bled a little in one and smudged in a corner, and he imagined her frowning while the scribe scraped and cursed himself for it. "We are not enemies," she wrote. "We would be fools to be. My bannermen do not like to be reminded that the North's greatest barrier is a memory and a wound. But they are farmers, and farmers remember who buys wool. Send me a list of what you can give and what you want. We can send an old smith to teach some tricks for making bronze sing instead of sulk. Send us obsidian, and I will send you copper. Bring me bone combs carved like wolves and flakes of amber found in ice, and I will send salt." She did not sign Queen. She signed Sansa. He read it twice and then put it by and did not let Tormund see his face. Ragwin fought a duel he had no business winning and won it, because the man who fought him loved the look of his own swing and Ragwin loved the moment when a man has guessed wrong. He stood afterward with his bronze bands blood slick and laughing. "Tell me you hate our fights less when one of ours wins," he said to John, who had taken the duel because a man denied his duel in the far north would turn his grievance into something bigger and more useless. "Tell me you love a crown just a little." "I love the man whose blood you didn't spill," John said, nodding toward the loser, who was being sat up and fed snow to chew so he would not swallow his blood. "I love it less when we must almost kill one to keep 10 from dying later. But I understand the math." "Math," Tormund said, spitting cheerfully over the cliff. "I never did trust numbers. They're too sure of themselves. The last winter had not ended for good just because it had lifted its boot a little. The white came back like a gull, never enough of it to make a meal, always there to remind you that meat should be rationed. Flurries bit at the corners of the camps, slid down throats when men laughed too hard, turned to needles and hair. The beacons proved themselves again, lighting quick when a hunt went wrong or when a boy went missing, and shadows of men with ropes flitted like quick spiders between fire and fire. The wind driver kept his promise to break poles, but did it less enthusiastically once the poles bit back. He began to be seen where men quietly gathered to plan raids on sledges, and Sarek cornered him once and spoke to him as if to a toddler hero, admiring, kind, and under it implacable. He flinched and laughed and said something about wind again, as men with the same metaphor will when they've fallen in love with it. One night his men set the trap that had killed Lisa's friend on John's men instead, and John understood that patience has to be taught more than once. They learned the trap now. They learned to set their feet new ways. It was Aelin who brought the news of the dead that would not lie, though the dead had never been done with news. She came in at dawn with her hawk's talons seeping blood and fear, and she had that look skin changers get when they come back to themselves after the world has been large inside their skulls. "Not whites as we knew them," she said, shivering though she wore 2 layers and a third across her shoulders. "Something learning. The eyes are wrong. They glow like ice, but the rest listens. They don't charge. They wait." "Learned from us?" Ison said, with no drama at all, simply stating how the world works. Everything living teaches something by being alive, and the dead watch. The old cold is not gone, just tired. Stand ready. They fought the learning dead in a blizzard that came up from nowhere like a hand clapped over a mouth. The snow came down too thick to taste properly, fat, wet flakes that turned the faces of men into bowls. The dead came up from the old burial mounds like secrets that children keep and think strong enough to carry them until a parent kneels and says the name of the secret and the child breaks with relief. They moved slow. They did not stop when Sarek's people cut them to joints. They did not speed up when Ragwin roared things full of rich, wholesome threats. John's ears rang with the shout of the storm. He set the line and kept it straight and kept men pressing together, shoulder to shoulder, so that nobody died alone unless somebody had to. Ghost went low and fast, mouth red and clever. When the dead found the line too costly, they went into the flanks and tried to chew them, and their John's beacons did what he had needed. Fire zipped along the rime and utter dark smoldered to life where rags tied to poles had been drenched in oil and covered with snow to keep them disguised. The light was a slow horror that bought them space. It did not destroy what could not feel heat, but it made the cold think twice, and that thinking was their weapon. Men fought with dragon glass and axes, with hammers, with knives. John used Longclaw because the blade knew him and he needed to know something in that white noise. He did not expect magic. He expected his arm. The learned dead broke when a mammoth came through the howl of snow like a moving hill wrapped in steam and men singing on its back. Someone had drunk too much of a fermented thing and had talked his friends into harnessing the beast. They came at exactly the wrong moment for the dead, at a low angle that turned a careful line into bones shoved into the ice. Things that once had been men burst like rotten wood under a wagon wheel. For a breath the world turned simple. Stay on your feet, keep your teeth clenched, shout what needs shouting. After, when they were counting and finding some they wished not to find and saying those names out loud again, John stood with his hands numb not from cold but from the habit of having clenched them too long. The dead lay in heaps that would be piles of memory by morning. Ison pried the head off one and looked at the face inside. "No spark," she said. "No mind. Only imitation. They've learned to wait and to test our flanks, but they haven't found themselves a leader." "Pray they don't," Tormund said. "I'm too old to fight a good leader." "We fought one," John said softly, and the wind pulled at his voice as if to pick it clean before it reached anyone's ear. "We fought more than one. Don't start counting ghosts," Ison warned, and her eyes were kind, rarely and dangerously kind. "The living need us more than memory does." John did not sleep for 2 days. He walked the line of the beacons. He checked the vents in the sun cairns. He sat with the woman whose son had gone missing and held her hand and spoke his name, and he sent 2 men he trusted to speak to the wind driver. He sat with Ragwin and taught him a game with stones that measured supply and demand without a single word about kings or crowns, and watched the then's thick fingers pick it up faster than pride would allow him to admit. He went to the pier they had rebuilt from timbers scavenged from 4 ships and a storm's remainder and stared out at a horizon that hid what it promised. At last he slept. He dreamed of a weirwood tree with leaves pale as nostrils. In the dream, the tree lowered a branch until the soft skin of the underside brushed his cheek, and when he woke he had that scent in his nose, a green too clean to be hung on words. The wind driver came without a crown. He looked tired like men look when they realize the world is bigger than their boasting, and he had a woman at his shoulder who looked like the child Sarek might have had if Sarek had been born from salt and frost. "Your fires," the boy said without preamble. "They're good. Half my men who came to cut poles are hungry and don't like my songs as much as they did last month. Give me a valley." "We share a valley," John said. "You first help build it, and then you get to defend it, and the men who take shelter in it will be yours to call if you need them for hard work or for danger. You'll send them when asked. You'll also send salt fish here for our women, and we'll send you the grain we bought from south. You'll give me 2 young men to foster, in the old way, not as hostages but as trust. And I'll give you 2 lads who will sit by your fires and come to think of your people as their own. They'll marry whom they wish. They'll take back the habit of your laughter and your knives." "I don't know this fostering," the wind driver said. "I know taking sons because you don't trust their fathers with them." "Then we'll learn each other something," John said. "The world's got room for a new trust or 2. "That's you in love with the South again," the boy said, almost fond, and made his little half-smile, the one that had once made his men feel tall. "It's me in love with the living," John said. "I'll take that in any dialect. Hardhome grew not fast but properly." The cliff face became an address. A man could say third vent from the black vein, and a woman could reach him. They carved benches and put hide over them. They painted the stone with juice from berries mashed until their hands were stained and their tongues turned merry. Someone cut runnels so that when it rained from mist and fog and fickle sea humor, water would thread down into cisterns instead of into men's mouths as they slept. One child fell into one of the runnels and was pulled out by her hair and smacked and then wrapped in furs and pressed to someone's bosom and told a story about a stag. They hung bells where ropes crossed the sea path. When the wind was right, the bells sang, and the song was either a warning or a promise. John liked to sit where he could hear them, and once when Sarek came to sit, she did not say a single thing that sounded like a knife. They watched gulls. Ghost pressed his head against John's knee and made a sound like a small thunder. Word came down the line of beacons like a spark fingering pitch. Men in south colors, on horses, riding near the ruined castles and peering north as if measuring with new rulers. John had expected it. Trade makes eating easier and envy easier yet. Some lord with a hard mouth would decide that the north had become too generous at its edges and would bridle. It was not even a lord at first, only a petty knight with a tiny troop who thought raiding men of the watch would teach his boys courage and bring him enough glory that a lord might notice him. He had a banner pocked with mildew and a dream full of himself. His men cut down 2 rangers and left them on their faces in the snow because the South likes a certain picture of duty and thinks leaving men to the elements is something the elements deserve. John sent Tormund with 5 to speak to the petty bravado and sent the wind driver with them because the boy needed to see how much of the world was small. They found the South men near the tumble of a watchtower whose stones had gone bald under 10,000 storms. The petty knight had a narrow name and a voice like sour beer. He took one look at Tormund and declared himself God's own scourge, and Tormund laughed and encouraged him to go scourge. "You can't fight wind with a spoon," Tormund said when he came back. Their armor shone like frozen piss, and they thought that meant something. They ran when we howled. One of them dropped a glove and spent 10 minutes weeping about it like a widow with a bad memory. But the real message came 2 days later, written in that careful thick hand Sansa used when she wished to make sure that the words bent the right way for the reader. A lord of middling size and appetite had sent a letter full of teeth to Winterfell, complaining that the watch had become a sieve and that wild men were crawling through to sniff at sheep. He wanted a levy raised and a hunt organized and a ceremony in the square where a few wild folk were hanged to remind the rest that the world had a plan for them. Sansa did not bother to write what she thought of it. She wrote, "I will handle it. Be steady. I will send a man quietly to the watch to remind them that not every southern command is to be obeyed. You must keep your people where they cannot be accused. Use trade, not bravado." There was trust there, and John let it sit in his chest like a warm stone. He built the 9 fires. They were not real fires but circles for council in 9 places. Hardhome, the ice caves at Deadfoot, the junction of the Milkwater and the little river the snowshoemen called the White Tongue. The flat east of the then villages where the earth under the frost had stones arranged in old patterns nobody knew the names of anymore. The silent glade where the crows came in a black river once a year to wash themselves and mock men. A valley of low spruce near a bend in the frostfangs where the sun came earlier by 10 minutes and left later by 5. A wind-blown dark near the frozen shore where the sea's breath warmed the hands of those daring enough to enter. A notch in a ridge that had become a road without anyone noticing it and must be made official. And the last at the foot of the wall itself to show the South that the North had a face it would not hide. He told the 9 that they would rule their own fires for most matters, settling arguments about a woman's cattle or a man's pride or whose boy had stolen whose boots, and that the 9 would speak to each other monthly in whatever manner ravens or runners could provide. He forbade blood feud that stretched beyond one winter. He did not forbid revenge but insisted it be kept tidy and punctual. He made a law so simple that even men who despised law could tolerate it. Share fire, speak true, carry what you can lift. The last was for thieves and for the idle, both of whom he would rather turn into men with purpose than men with ears gone for their sins. Kingless rules, Sarek said, approving against her will. I'll take them, but if you start counting the beads in my hair, I'll cut off your ears and feed them to your wolf. Ghost is choosy, John said. He only eats what could kill me. Then I'll practice. The children were the first to make the new world feel distinct and not merely a patch on a torn sleeve. They had never stood in a southern hall and been shushed while their betters spoke. They had never seen a maester properly, only old women like Ison who chewed birch and let spit roll out when she said words she liked. They did clever things without asking permission. A boy sat on the edge of a sun cairn and discovered that if he sang into the flue it made a long flat note that could be heard 2 caves away. Within a week there were codes. Within a month there were songs that told you who was coming to bed you. A girl with hands like knots figured out that if you braided hide and wool together and dipped it in pitch then hammered it flat and braided it again, you could make a strap that would not break even when a mammoth decided it wanted to go elsewhere. She gave the strap a name after herself because that is how invention works in the North, proudly and only half in jest. Ellen's hawk hatched 2 pale chicks, ugly as boiled eggs, and when they were ready she gave one to the wind driver and one to a then boy whose mother had died and who laughed in his sleep with a sound so little that it embarrassed the dark. Make friends with the sky, she told them, and they did, mostly by falling out of it and getting up boasting. John took the long route to visit the 9 fires. He liked to walk the land, not for romance but because his legs worked better when they were asked to earn their keep. He went with Ghost always and with 2 men never the same, a rotating guard of the loyal and the sullen both, so that none would say the king. He would never say the word, but it followed him like a smell, preferred one clan to another. He slept on the ground when he could, and when he slept under a roof he shared it as if roofs fell if a man snored alone. He learned the names of the little rivers that weren't on any map because nobody had thought to write them down, only to drink from them and catch fish in them and kiss by them and be wounded beside them. He learned the names men gave weather. He learned a blizzard from the west called a knife blizzard, and one from the sea a wet crow, and one from the north a weeper. He learned the way reindeer liked to paw the snow to find lichen and the way wolves circled the slopes where sheep had been before sheep learned better. They forget, Sarek said, walking with him one night. The sheep forget. The wolves do not. We teach the sheep, John said. We make it hard for the wolves. You're more wolf than sheep, she said. She did not smile. It was not a compliment and not an insult. Be careful. Wolves are lonesome. Ghost snorted as if to protest, and John put his hand on the wolf's back and felt the strength under the fur like a current. The worst of the South came not as a banner but as a fever, which makes sense. The world often sends notification with fire and color. Trudging death prefers to be quiet. 3 women fell first, and their lips cracked and bled, and their fingers went purple while their chests worked like bellows and failed to move the air they needed. Men said it was the old winter come in a new skin. Ison said it was lung rot and told men to boil water and burn straw and keep mothers from babies they loved. John stared at the ring of women sitting with their backs pressed to stone that remembered warmth and saw how hope can and cannot help. He rode south for herbs and received bundles that had been packed tight and sent in a hurry with a note from the Queen in the north about how a woman in White Harbor had found a patch of fever and bartered with it until it left the young and clung only to old men who had no use for their lives left anyway. "Do her tricks," Sansa wrote without naming the trick, "because sometimes a woman's trick is her own, and you should not put it into a letter and send it to a brother. Ison did the trick or something like it, chewing leaves and spitting boiling bark, tying charms over cradles. The fever took less than it wanted. The dead were wrapped in their best furs and left on a hill where the wind could comb them and the living could see them and not forget. It was in the middle of that, when men were too tired to fight and too angry to sleep, that the learned dead came again, in fewer numbers and with a quickness that did not belong to snow. Jon met them at the notch in the ridge that had turned into a road and that the Nine Fires had named, because men must name things or the world makes jokes of them. The Walker's Belt. He had 50 with him and he would have liked 100, but he would not get them. He went careful because the last time had taught him the dead liked flanks and patience. Serrig was with him and the Winddriver and Ragwin and Ghost and 2 boys carrying javelins and terror in equal measure. They placed their line like a set of teeth with spaces left in it, places where men could pass through and then step back into place when they had thrown or struck. They made their feet safe with stakes under the snow so that if a man were shoved, his heel would catch and he would clench and not fall. They set the beacons where the snow would take longest to smother. They waited with the snow making their eyelashes heavy. The dead came like men who'd found an old map and added new paths. They tested the teeth and found them sharp and waited, then tried the gaps and found them full. Ghost went forward low and fast, like a thought that knows its own aim, and came back with his muzzle buttered with old blood that looked black as a lie. Jon spent his arm and then spent it again and found he still had it to spend. The Winddriver proved nimble and gave good advice. "Step left, you fool, there's a rock." And Ragwin laughed as the dead crashed against him, not with any joy in death but with the joy of a man not easily put aside. Serrig took 3 in the face like a riddle and solved each with the logic of a blade. There was a woman among the dead, or the memory of one, wearing hair that had frozen into a shape like a coronet. She held a knife of ice. Jon faced her and felt something old try to remind him of old fear. He lifted Longclaw because habit is a better friend than metaphysics on a day when the snow wants to cut you in half. The blades met and the ring of it was a taste in his teeth. Her mouth opened and he heard nothing. The sound was not for his kind of ear. He stepped forward and right as he'd taught 3 boys that morning when he'd rather have slept. She lunged, and he let the lunge pass him and cut at the elbow, which is a joint even in snow. The knife fell. He cut again because when a thing tries for your heart and misses, you do not reward it with poetry. She fell like a tent when a peg is pulled. He did not fool himself into thinking that was another. The stories have shapes and this was a different shape, but it was close enough to scraped the imagination clean, and when the dead broke, it was with relief. They set fire where fire would make sense, and they pulled men back, and they put names to the fallen, and it was tedious and correct, and it saved bellies on winter nights not yet arrived. They went home to fires that rumbled, and to the sound of sun-cairn vents breathing, and to the smell of the sea that made even men who hated boats smile without realizing that they were doing it. Jon sat alone that night with Ghost, and the sound of the bells the sea wind liked to pluck. He sat on the outjut of cliff they called Old Woman's Nose because there is no place men will not name something stupid. The aurora came as if someone were pulling a shawl across the sky and realized it was pretty and did it slowly. It made banners that were not banners and reminded him that the southern trick of making a symbol stand for men and then making men die for the symbol is clever and sometimes stupid. Ghost lay with his head in Jon's lap and watched the same sky. Jon whispered without knowing he was going to. "Ygritte," he said. It felt like saying the beginning of a prayer and then forgetting the rest on purpose to see if the gods would fill it in. The wind did not answer. The bells did. He imagined her in the sound for a breath and did not reprimand himself. Ghost's ear flicked. The Winddriver married a woman from the Thens and a girl from the shore in a joke that wasn't one. It was a way of making the line between his men and the rest fade like a track in new snow. Sereg took a man, then tossed him like a wolf shakes a rabbit, and later laughed into her drink about it with the pleasure of a predator who has found that sometimes the hunt is its own end. Ragwin cut off his bronze bands and said they were making his arms ugly, and he would wear scars instead because scars are more honest ornaments. Isen died. She did it in the least dramatic way she could, on a bench with her hair unplaited and her jaw relaxed after 60 years of holding it angry. She cursed once before she went, not because she needed to but because the world deserved to be admonished. Jon sat her out in the wind with her birch bundle under her hands and her chin lifted, and men came to touch the skin of those bones one last time as if asking for a little luck from a woman who had refused anyone any luck that wasn't earned. Aelin's chicks grew less ugly and more intelligent, which is to say their ugliness took on a purpose. She and Sereg taught boys and girls to read the sky and the sea and the faces of men both. They made a sign for liar that you could do with 2 fingers at your belt and a twist of your wrist, so that in council around a fire women could accuse a man without cutting his tongue. They taught jokes that gave you permission to be afraid, which men needed more than food sometimes. They taught a song that measured time so that a man hauling wood could keep stepping when his back wanted to become oak itself. The 9 fires learned to bicker efficiently. The gift of being heard often makes men talk more than they should. The trick is making them talk better, which the North is not naturally suited to but which Jon forced by insisting that the one who complains about a rule must propose one in its place. You can limit fools that way without forbidding them. Ravens kept coming back and going forth. Sansa sent a smith who drove his sledge like a charioteer and drank like a hero, and he taught a boy named Hyam to make bronze that rang and did not split. He taught a girl named Kel to make a hinge that didn't squeal like a pig when it turned. He taught Jon to let other men teach boys and not stand watching and make the lesson about himself. For all this, Jon gave the smith a ring carved from a mammoth bone and some obsidian that glowed like a trapped ember when you held it right, and fish smoked with pine that did not taste entirely like a mistake. There were setbacks because life likes to surprise men who grow too fond of their own designs. A caravan slid into the milk water and vanished under a veneer of ice so pretty it seemed a shame to smash it. A boy went out to piss and did not return, and they found him a day later sitting not 5 paces from the path, knees up, face blue, as if sleep had called his name in a voice he loved and he had obeyed. A fire ran wrong and ate a rope, and a rope tried to strangle a man who had made it, as if to teach him his art could disown him. Jon told each misfortune like an old saga with a moral at the end and bored men enough that they decided to make fewer deaths just to shut him up. Ghost got a scar on his muzzle from a cat that had thought it could be a taller wolf and has since rethought. On a morning when the sea lay like steel and the sun seemed to enjoy its work, the watch came up the path in the person of Ed and 20 men, who looked like they had slept with their boots on for a month. Ed's face broke at the corners into almost a smile. We had a lordling come up with 50 and a letter that told me to let him pass and take men and punish wild folk until he'd made a point, Ed said without greeting. I told him he could pass if he left his men and if he wore black and if he swore, and he did not like those options and went away in a tantrum that made my ravens as happy as they get. The world will try again, and harder. Don't hit first and don't flinch. You know this, but knowing isn't the same as remembering when you're hungry. I remember, Jon said. He put his hand on Ed's shoulder and felt bone and leather and something that had learned not to crack under burden. Eat, he said. We have bread that will make you forgive the sea for being cold. Ed ate and studied the sun cairns and said, I hate cleverness. It makes a man feel like a fool. Good work. And Jon felt something lift in him that he had not known was heavy. On a night later, when sleep was ashore, he could not land on B. Because the bell-caller had rung for counsel about a small matter that had turned big. A woman insisting a boy had been promised her and the boy insisting he had promised himself something else. Jon stepped out onto the cliff and found someone waiting where the bells swung. Ragwin, but not the Ragwin who laughed. The bands were gone permanently and his heavy arms stood up on their own. He had blood on his knuckles and a frown that did not leave his face when he saw Jon. I fought a man today, he said, straightforward as he cut wood. It did not have to be fought. He spoke wrong to Sereg and I wanted to teach him. I taught him too much. He is hurt like a wheat sack with mice in it. Will he live? Jon asked. Yes, Ragwin said. He will live and he will not look me in the eye again. which is something like dying. John put his hand on the stone the bells were pegged into. It had warmed under sun and held that warmth like a cheap thief. "You could do a thing," he said. "You could go to him when he is ready to hear you and stand for his family. Hunt for them when they need meat. Fetch water when the water is too far. Sit outside his tent when he has nightmares and the woman inside is tired of his noise. That's a thing a man can do to show regret without making it about his own sorrow." Ragwin was quiet. The sea breathed. A gull made a sound like a saw, and the wind sawed back at it. "I can do that," Ragwin said finally. "It will be boring." "It is supposed to be." "Kingship is boring," John said, and saw in Ragwin's frown the reflection of a crown shaped like wolves. He did not wear a crown, but they made him one anyway because the world likes to give shape to what it fears or loves or both. It was not iron and not gold. It was strips of hammered bronze plated with thin bones and polished obsidian beads, light enough that a man could forget it until it clipped the rock when he ducked and reminded him. Isen had planned it before she died, and Lisa made it, and Sarek added a charm that would jangle when a lie was coming near. They put it on John's head one night when he came in wet with snow and too tired to argue. Tormund said, "He'll call it a hat." And John said, "It's a hat." And everyone laughed, and the laughter did them all the good they needed. He wore it sometimes, and sometimes left it hanging by the bells for anyone who wanted to see that a crown is only a delicate thing that wishes to be a shape and fails to be food. He wrote another letter south to Sansa, but it was only 3 lines. "The living are still living," he wrote. "The dead are still learning. I am what the people make me." She wrote back, "And what they need you to be. Do not refuse them the dignity of needs." He read that and put the paper on the table and watched the way the ink dried as if it mattered. And it did. There was a day when all 9 fires sent runners at once, and when all the runners arrived panting and Jonah-faced. There is a North word for men who bring bad tidings, a word that tastes like a choke. The picture came into view. The learned dead were gathering not in 1s and 10s as they had, but by 50s. Not enough to roll over them, not yet. Enough to make a point. They were avoiding the beacons that smoked under snow and going where the light felt stubborn. They had found the sound of the bells and learned what it meant and chosen then to strike somewhere else. They were clever enough to be a problem and stupid enough to be vulnerable when hit once properly. "We go to the Valley of Low Spruce," John said. "They want to chew the slow, easy work. We hit them in a tangle they hate. We bring torches that hiss instead of guttering. We bring the mammoth if he'll come." He came. The mammoth came because the boy who had figured out the flu notes had learned what note made the animal move like water downhill. He played it, and the beast came placid as an avalanche that had chosen its path and was kind to those who stepped aside. They had soaked ropes in brine and tied them where they could yank a dead man's legs out from under him and then stomp him before he remembered how he had stood. They had dug pits and covered them like recipes, with layers of snow and brush and cruelty. When the dead came, they walked into a kitchen where the cooks were ready. The fight was long not because the dead were brave, but because stupid hunger makes you linger over a table that is set with traps if you have no better table. Ragwin stood like a man who has found the honest use of his bands, and Sarek moved like a thought a man tries to catch and fails to hold. The Winddriver shouted advice that had the flavor of being young and wrong at its center. But he learned, and by the end of the day, he had swallowed down the need to make a cry into a strategy. John lost count of blows. He did not lose count of men. A boy named Hyam, whose bronze sang, died with a grin like a lesson he wished he could keep. His body was carried to the hill and wind-combed and then burned because plans change when truth asks it. A girl named Kel, whose hinge didn't squeal, lived and told a story afterward that was so full of clarity that men clapped their thighs and said if they had heard it ahead of time, they would have been less slow to the lesson. In the quiet that came after, John felt something like a hand withdraw from his heart. He found himself laughing at nothing for a moment, which is one of the ways a man's insides let out steam. Ghost licked his knuckles and made a noise. The bells sang in a curious pattern, as if the wind had decided to learn a tune. "We won't be done with them," Tormund said. "We'll never be done until the world forgets the shape of winter." "No," John said. "We'll die long before the forgetting." But between there and here we can set stones in a way that when another king comes and wants to roll the world up and beat it with a stick, the world rolls less and sticks less, and men sit on their benches and frown and go on eating. You are a terrible poet, Tormund said. I am glad you are not a singer. I'm glad you are, Jon said, and Tormund thumped him, and they both pretended that did not feel like brothers remembering a mother. Serrig came to him that night and smacked his shoulder with the back of her hand like a sister who'd been waiting for a chance. You make me bored, she said. I think that's what peace is for people like me. I'm sorry, Jon said, and meant it and also didn't. Later, when spring was not spring but springish, when the sea had the color of knives that had been used and washed and set aside, when the bells had learned to sing two songs that meant rain and luck and men had stopped listening for the sound of another song that meant doom because doom had become a humming they could not do anything about, they gathered in the ring in front of the cliff where the wind was a little kinder. The fires around made the stone look golden, and Jon wished to dislike it but didn't. Everyone who mattered and everyone who did not showed up, which is how you tell a people is a people. The crown was handed to him because a funny thing about crowns is that even when a man refuses them, others get used to having something to hand to mean a feeling. He put it on himself that time because he could see this was less a ceremony for him than for them, a place for them to set a feeling down and know it would not blow away. The obsidian beads clicked, and the charm Serrig had tied to it with gut thread rang once, twice. The sea rang back like a big old bell. Tormund shouted something obscene but lovely. The Winddriver smiled his new smile, which had learned to show less tooth and more brain. Ragwin stood with a face like a hearth. Aelin's hawk took wind and made a clean slow circle and sat again. Ghost leaned into Jon's thigh and sighed as if to say, "This is enough for tonight." "You'll call me king," Jon said, finally saying the word, and it felt strange like a new boot. "If you need the word, I won't make you say it if you don't. I'll be the man you send two children of your heart to when you want them to learn another way to live. And I'll be the man who sends two of mine to you. I'll be the man who counts fish and grain and salt, and the man who listens when a woman says she swore something in a tent and the man she swore it with swears something else. I'll be the man who goes first when the dead come to learn again, and the man who eats last on a night like this. I'll be the man who takes the blame when a caravan goes under the ice. I'll be the man you come to when you're too proud to go to anyone else. I won't be the man who tells you who to marry or who to kill without asking you for a story first. I won't be the king who sits in a pretty chair and puts iron on my head and thinks that keeps snow off your beds. I'll wear a hat sometimes to make you feel like your feeling has been recognized by the world, and I'll hang it on the bell when I want to remind you that your feeling belongs to you." He lifted the crown with one hand and hooked it over the peg where the bells hung, and the bronze kissed the bronze and made a note like a promise. "We will be the people who share fire and speak true and carry what we can lift. We will be the ones who know each other's names. And when the world tries to teach our children fear, we will teach them how to be bored by fear. And when the world brings winter again and asks us to die because it is pretty when we do, we will make bread and insult each other and go on being hard to kill." The cheer that rose was not a roar exactly. It was a thick, human noise, messy and longer than a roar would be, because men like to outshout each other when they feel anything. He took it into himself like weather. The bells answered at the end without anyone touching them. Later Serrig told him that meant a good year, and Ison would have told him it meant nothing, and Tormund told him it meant the wind approved of obscenities that night and wanted to say a few of its own. He smiled and let each be true. When he went to sleep, the crown was still hanging by the bells, and he knew that in the morning it would be gone because someone would have taken it to try it on and walk out to piss wearing it, and maybe return it and maybe not. He hoped their dogs would bark at the sight. He hoped the dogs would learn to be bored by kings too. Ghost's breath warmed his throat. He dreamed of a tree again, and the tree asked no questions and answered none either. He woke before dawn to the town's first bread of the day, the smell of pine under heat, the quick chatter of children deciding whose turn it was to run the flues, the sound of bells singing a nonsense song. He rose and went out under a sky that promised nothing and gave at least a clean light. He touched the peg where the crown had hung for a minute the night before and felt the bronze's faint heat print on the stone. He didn't look to see who had taken it. He didn't need to. It belonged to all of them now, and to him only as long as they needed it to. Sometime later, the wind driver became Hallen again because names fall off like scabs when they're no longer needed. He lost 2 fingers to frost when he got stubborn in a competition with the sea and laughed and said he was tired of untying knots anyway. Ragwin stood for the man he had hurt and found that boredom can be thought that takes a shape, not an emptiness. Sometimes at night he'd catch himself frowning with pleasure at how unexciting goodness is and then swear and throw something. Sarek taught 2 boys to dance like knives and then taught them to fold clothes because their wives would need them to. Aelin's hawks learned a flight path that would have confused a southern map and made perfect sense to a woman who knew what wind sounds like when it's getting ready to lie. The 9 fires argued loud and clever. Men learned how to tie a rope in a way that would not strangle a friend, and how to spot a run that wanted to be a road, and how to tell if a story was going to be worth the time it took to drink while it was told. The learned dead became a rumor again, and that rumor became a bedtime story that made children wide-eyed, and that story became a game played with sticks, and that game became a rule that boys who played it should not hit each other in the teeth unless it was their last idea. The 9 fires gave gifts to the south. Combs and beads, a kind of smoked fish that southern men laughed at and then ate and then ordered more of and pretended they had always loved. A fur that did not shed. The knowledge of how to carve vents in stone that make a room breathe in 2 directions. The south sent nurses with herbs and a priest who talked so much and so kindly that men who had sworn to never let a southern tongue warm their ears found themselves warmed and then angry and then warmed again. The priest baptized a boy in seawater because he would not walk to the sweet pool where that was usually done. And the boy came out sputtering and cursing and became a good man largely to prevent the priest from claiming credit for him. Jon smiled at the priest and then stayed out of his way mostly because he had things to do that the gods weren't much help with. He allowed himself a woman once, a widow whose laugh solved problems, because he was a man and not a cut stone, and he loved her without any of the elaborate words men prefer when they fear they may be loved less. She died of being a person, which is to say the body decided it had done enough. He carved her name into the cliff and sat there until the bell called him, and he went because that is how a king beyond walls and within them must go, when called. He visited the wall less and less, not because he loved it less but because it had become a memory and he had work. When he did go, Ed had more gray in his hair and more camaraderie in his throat. They sat on old barrel staves by a fire that had always been too mean for the space it wanted to warm, and they played the game with stones and pretended not to be thinking about dead boys. "You made a country," Ed said once, as if talking about a sled. "I made a habit," Jon said. "I made a way men set their feet. That is what a country is," Ed said. "I'm glad you didn't say it out loud down there. They'd get ideas." Before he left, Jon stood at the gate, and he put a hand to the wall, and it felt like old bone and new ice and some stubborn music that will not be tuned. He remembered a boy too proud to cry, a man too dirty to love, a brother in black, a lover dead, a king he did not wish to be and became anyway, a man who had learned to think while learning to sleep less. Ghost pressed his shoulder into Jon's knee and looked up as if to say, "There is another path, and it is the one we are going to take." Jon smiled and took it, and the bells sang, because the wind had chosen mischievousness that day, and he had learned to love even that.